Hello friends and welcome to Figure Study, where we're doing things a little different this time. It's one of those rare occasions where I'm looking at a figure that does not actually transform. This is the Astrobots Apollo, specifically the Day 13 weathered version, which was, I guess, a convention exclusive. The only reason I have this is because it was pretty much the only version I could find available on eBay or anywhere. But yeah. For those unfamiliar with the Astrobots, basically there were two companies involved, Toy Forge and Toy Notch. I think Toy Notch is the company that developed the Astrobots in the first place, and then Toy Forge kind of picked them up and mass-produced them using injection molding as opposed to 3D printing. I think that's the story. These things were available about a year ago, and I never got them, and it was kind of like, you know, trying to hardline, like, this doesn't transform, I'm not adding it to my collection, but it just looks so freaking cool, and it's incredibly highly articulated, so it was like, finally I caved, and yeah, I'm glad I did, because ever since I got this guy, I've been spending a fair bit of time each night just posing him and taking photos, because it's just fun to do. So yeah, getting into the coloration on this guy, he is pretty much gray, blue, and orange across the board as a sort of general color scheme. There's a little bit in the chest and head of white, which is almost like a bone white, at least in the weathered version it is. I don't know about the non-weathered one, but it's a cool color scheme. This blue and this orange together, very, very, very nice combination. It's, I mean, blue and orange are complementary colors, but this is like a very pleasing combination of shades. So they're complementary, but also it's just a nice shade choice that they did. And the gray also is a similar tone, so it all works together very nicely. And the color separation is great too. I like how there are all these little like defined bits where you've got like the gray toes, orange guards or whatever. It alternates nicely all the way through the entire figure. And then you've got like little accents here and there to tie everything together a bit more, like how you've got little bits of orange on the thighs, which we'll see better in more detail later, and like some blue and orange details going up the spine. It looks good. And also this version, the weathered version, comes with this little tattered cloak thing, which is a cool little accessory. It's simple, but effective. I like it. With that being said, I'm going to actually remove it because, you know, now that we've looked at that, we can get rid of it so that we can look at the details a little bit better. And I'll get his arms kind of straightened out for now so we can look at what we got before moving on to, weirdly, articulation, which is something that I don't normally cover, I know. But the entire point of these figures is the articulation, so I'm going to have to look at it. And you can see a little bit more of that detailing and design work on the chest there, and I like these kind of pec turbines that are going there and then turning them around. Some really nice detailing on the back as well. Obviously there's a little less, but it's still very, very nicely done. Or I should say there's less like big moments. You got a little bit of orange on the back of the thighs there, but like there's more going on in the front here. But that's not to say there's not a lot going on in the back too. I also like how you've got kind of like the, I guess, vents on the back. And if you look at the way they line up, they're a little bit off-center, but it still seems like you could totally see these working as intakes and these as exhaust ports. As for the fine detailing, I'm not entirely sure there's much I can say other than this just is full of detail and sculpting, and it all looks great. It all looks very robotic. There you can see the little orange on the inside of the thigh there. The hinges and joints, in many cases, are actually very nicely molded as well. This entire spine section that can move around and expose new bits and close off others. So nicely detailed. Seriously, it's amazing, the detailing on this guy. Arms too, the shoulders, these little tampagraphs everywhere. And the weathering is applied on top of the tampagraphs. There's just a little bit of red in the bicep there. But it's small enough that it doesn't like disrupt the rest of the design. And you can see more of the detailing in there. This is the battery compartment where you can store some LR44s, and we'll see how that comes into play later. But the head also is great. I love this like big recess, like this big bulky collar that's kind of like got the head and neck recessed into the torso. The head is like an interesting combination of like a skull and like a hockey helmet or something. That's very cool. One of the things I also really like about this head design is the way that it's designed is like if you tilt the head, if you tilt it slightly, it actually looks like one of the eyes is squinting a little bit. It's particularly noticeable when we put those batteries to good use. Push the head down and get that light turned on. And yeah, it's a really neat effect. It's so subtle and simple, but it works so well. As I said, but I need to reiterate, the fact that there's this weathering effect all over everything, it helps to really bring those details out a lot. Like even at a distance, you can see there's a ton of texture and detailing all over this guy, and I love it. It's so cool. This design is great. The coloring is great. The detailing is great. It's all great. I know some people think the proportions are a little strange. And I mean, they're definitely unorthodox because you've got like the really big bulky torso, the bulky legs, and this extremely narrow spine. But I think that's really cool. Yeah, it's definitely different, but I really like that. It's a cool effect. I like how you've got these two kind of bulky humanoid sections that are connected by this surprisingly narrow strip. It's like this very narrow armature that is actually also nicely detailed with various like pistons and whatnot. And yeah, it's just so cool. Now, bear with me because I'm actually going to be going over articulation for the first time, I think, ever in detail. I don't think I've ever done this on a video. So I'm going to try to get all the points that I can. I'm probably not going to be commenting too much in terms of how utilitarian the different joints are, because poseability is not a huge thing that is on my list when I talk about stuff. So yeah, I'm just going to be kind of going over what the joints are, and that's it. So if you're looking for me to critique the poseability, all I'm going to say is the poseability is great. So the toes can move up and down, which is super great. The heels can move up and down and side to side. Unfortunately, they're not on a ball joint, so you can't turn them, but it's fine. The knees are double jointed, which is very nice. You get, I feel like it looks a little better if you start bending this one, if you're doing like subtle bends, but you get way more range if you bend the bottom hinge first. And the hips swivel, and they're on a V-cut, which it makes certain poses a little tricky, especially because if you use them in tandem with the thigh swivel, then like you can see, it conforms to that circular shape when you go in like this, but then when you start to turn it, it pushes the thigh out a little bit, which makes certain very specific poses a little tricky, but it's fine. And you also get a hinge out. As a waist swivel at the, where you expect it. There's a hinge here, and then there's actually a ball joint up here, so you can get side to side, you can get some additional turn up top here, and you get forward and backward crunch independent of this joint here. For the shoulders, it's like a very large ball socket that can pull out a little bit for a little bit more range. And then also, of course, you can turn it. And the swivel is actually not part of the ball joint, because you can see these orange bits don't move when I turn it. And you got a hinge there. The bicep swivels. Some of these joints were very tight when I got them out of the box because the weathering effect kind of made things a little bit sticky, but it's fine. It's actually very durable, very well made, so I wasn't worried about breaking them. And you got double jointed elbows. And much like the knees, there are certain ways it looks a little bit better without breaking up the sculpt, and then other ways where it's better for range. And I like that they've got some added detail on the inside there, like that, just that little bit that comes out when you bend the elbow so it doesn't break the sculpt too much. The hands are full of articulation. You've got the swivel, you've got up and down. The thumb is on a ball joint, so that can move around a lot. But then there's also a hinge there and a hinge there. And the fingers have, you can see all the different hinges that are in the fingers, plus they can move in and out to spread, which is nice. That's very cool. And lastly, the head, which again looks very cool. You can actually see too, it's hard to make out, but there is some nice detailing on the neck. The neck doesn't really have the weathering effect, but I think the weathering effect was applied after assembly. I wouldn't necessarily want to try and get a brush in there either. The base of the neck is on its own kind of, I don't know if it's a hinge system or a ball joint, but you can kind of see it moving around in there. And then the head at the top of the neck is on its own ball joint, which also adds for quite a bit of posability. You can kind of bring the neck forward, you can push it up to keep it more recessed. And also if you push down on the head, you get those batteries to activate and the lights turn on, and it looks so great. And that's really all there is to this guy. Like, he doesn't transform, he's just very, very nicely detailed and very posable. It's kind of amazing how awesome this guy is just based on that fact. And the joints are good for like lots of dramatic poses and also lots of subtle poses. Anyway, on to size comparisons. There he is with a Siege Deluxe, and you can see he's big. He's not huge. At one point I busted out the tape measure just to verify, get like actual solid numbers, and he is just over 7 inches tall. But like, he's dense, he's sturdy, he's packed with articulation and detail. It's some really, really good stuff. And here he is, even though he doesn't transform, but here he is with the duck tank. And yeah, I think that's actually gonna do it for for Apollo here. There's not really a whole lot that I can say about him at this point. Anything else really, because he's just neat. he's posable, but he doesn't transform. Like, there's not much else for me to say. He looks great. He poses great. He's like, once you find like the sweet spot with his balance, he's quite stable as well. He's just cool. I love this guy. As I said, he's fun to mess with. And just posing him, like, that's all you gotta do, and it's great. And he looks so great. He's like a super beefed up Terminator endoskeleton that doesn't actually need any kind of humanoid bits on top, because who cares? He looks like one of the robots from Monday Night Football promos if they were actually designed by someone who could make something look cool. He's just awesome, and the weathered effect, in my mind, enhances everything several times over, because again, it really pulls out all those details and little crevices and stuff. The only real gripes I have are the hips. I just wish that the hips could move at a more like straight angle, but it's a really small thing to be complaining about, especially since I'm not huge into articulation in the first place. Though I will say this guy has me seriously thinking about certain other figures. I'm not going to do any 3A stuff or anything like that. It's too big, too expensive. I would probably, at this point, due to this guy being awesome, love to get my hands on, was it Flame Toys? Their version of Tarn, because that thing looks amazing, but it's also really, really expensive, and I am not spending that kind of money on something that it can't transform, despite how awesome it looks. But yeah, that's enough ranting about this. Also, there is the other Astrobot that came out with this guy is Argos, I think. It's funny, I was more interested in that design when I first saw the two of them together, but seeing the weathered version of this, it's no contest. I thought I would be put off by his little robo-toes, but no, they really don't bother me. I've kind of gotten used to them at this point. But anyway, that's it. There's really not a whole lot else I can say, because like I said, this guy doesn't transform. He's just cool. He's super posable, he looks amazing, and is cool. What are your thoughts on Astrobots Apollo? Well, actually, any Astrobots, whether it's this guy, whether it's the non-weathered version, whether it's the other guy. Is this something you could see yourself getting? Is this something you already have? If you do already have it, what are your thoughts? What are your preferences between the two, if you have either one or have seen either one? Are you broken up over the fact that they don't really come with accessories, or is that fine because you can give them your unused Transformer accessories, which is something I've been thinking I should do at some point. I feel like he'd be really cool, just like a big sword. Whatever your thoughts, feel free to comment down below. I always enjoy hearing from you all. And while you're at it, also feel free to like, subscribe, or if you're feeling generous, you could buy me a coffee. There will be a link in the description. Any of those things would make me a happy Rob. And remember, art is more than meets the eye. Or I guess in this case, exactly what meets the eye, because he doesn't transform. But he's still awesome.